This episode contains graphic content that may not be suitable for all ages. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat with someone at 988lifeline.org. Those outside of the US, reach out to someone at your local crisis center or hotline. Please do not suffer in silence. Between the years 1986 and 1989, a series of mysterious double murders plagued young couples in the Virginia area, along a stretch of road known as the Colonial Parkway. The Parkway, which spans roughly 22 miles in southeastern Virginia, is a scenic road that links together the 3 points of Virginia's historic triangle: Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. The first crime took place in October of 1986, when two women, 27-year-old Kathy Thomas and 21-year-old Rebecca Dowski, were last seen on the campus of William and Mary, a college attended by the latter. Both were no-shows for plans that week, and their vehicle was found abandoned on October 12th, having been pushed off into the brush and bramble near the York River. The bodies of the two women were found inside, having been brutally assaulted before their throats were cut and their bodies were doused in diesel fuel. Evidence left behind indicated that the killer was right-handed and may have used brine-soaked ropes to bind the victims before their deaths. However, the evidence left behind was rather confused and chaotic, and with the killer not believed to have a prior known link to the victims, investigators were stumped. Nearly a year later, 20-year-old David Knobling and 14-year-old Robin Edwards met for the first time. Robin was actually on a date with one of David's younger relatives, but the two ended up connecting during the drive home, and were believed to have met up again later on the night of September 19th, 1987, a few hours after David drove Robin home. After making it home for her curfew, it's believed that Robin had snuck out and met up again with David. David's truck was found abandoned the following morning, but their two bodies weren't found until September 23rd. Both had been shot to death. Like the murder of Kathy and Rebecca from the year prior, the details of the crime mystified the police and the press. The following spring, the presumed killer struck again. This time, he targeted two students from Christopher Newport University, 18-year-old Sandra Haley and 20-year-old Keith Call, who had both been seen early on the morning of April 10th, 1988, leaving a party in order to make their respective curfews. Keith's vehicle was found abandoned the following morning, but unlike the other crimes, their two bodies were never found. For that reason, their strange disappearance and presumed deaths have only been linked to the others through evidence recovered inside and or near Keith's abandoned vehicle. The next year, 1989, over Labor Day weekend, 21-year-old Daniel Lauer began driving from his hometown in Amelia County out to Virginia Beach, where he planned to live with his brother and his brother's girlfriend, Anna Phelps. Daniel and Anna began making the drive out at 11:15 p.m. on September 4th, 1989, but Daniel's 1972 Chevy Nova was found abandoned the next day. Daniel and Anna's bodies would not be found for roughly 2 months, making the circumstances of their death pretty unclear. Due to the circumstances, however, they were presumably linked to the same crime spree. In the years that followed, investigators would begin to narrow in on the belief that all 4 crimes, all double murders, shared similarities. The victims had all been young couples, or from a distance could be mistaken to be young couples, who had all been driving on or near the Colonial Parkway in the late evening hours. The crimes took place within roughly 20 miles of each other, and fit a pattern, each crime taking place the next year. Over the years, some have theorized that the killer was law enforcement, or at least someone posing as law enforcement in order to get the victims to pull over. From there, the victims would be separated from the vehicle and each other, and then bound or attacked in some way. Burglary appeared to not be a motive. Yet, sexual assault or rape did not seem prevalent at every crime scene, so the unknown subject's modus operandi remained elusive. Other crimes would be loosely linked to this crime spree, later dubbed the Colonial Parkway Murders, including the 1989 slaying of Teresa Lynn Spa Howell from the city of Hampton, Virginia. I originally covered this story back in 2020, and at the time, this seemed like one of those stories that would never receive an update. However, at the end of that original episode, I did let you all know that DNA testing was still taking place, and could change the circumstances for any of these crimes in the months or years to come. In the case of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, the second chronological crime linked to the Colonial Parkway murders, things have indeed changed. On Monday, January 8th, 2024, it was announced that police had a suspect for the murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards. As I touched on just a moment ago, 20-year-old David and 14-year-old Robin went missing after a night out in September of 1987. Robin had gone out on a date with one of David's relatives, and he had acted as their chaperone, so to speak. He, along with two of his younger relatives, and Robin were supposed to go out to a movie that night, but they ended up spending a few hours at an arcade. David later drove them all home, and it's believed that he and Robin, who bonded during the drive home, later decided to meet up. David's pickup truck was found abandoned near the James River Bridge roughly 1 day later. Their bodies were found 2 days after that, both having been shot to death. Each had suffered one gunshot wound to the head, but David also had an additional gunshot wound to his shoulder, indicating that he might have attempted to run away or fight back. Robin, sadly, had been sexually assaulted. After years of uncertainty, police finally announced just yesterday that they finally had a suspect. A man named Alan W. Wilmer Sr.
Good afternoon. My name is Corinne Geller. I'm the Public Relations Director for the Virginia State Police. Thank you to all who are joining us today, and to those watching via the live stream. The press conference will consist of several speakers, and then following that we will open the floor to questions, so we do ask our media friends to please hold off for your questions until the end. On behalf of the City of Hampton Police Division, the City of Hampton Commonwealth's Attorney Anton Bell, Isle of Wight County Commonwealth's Attorney Georgette Phillips, the Virginia State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigations Chesapeake Field Office, the FBI Norfolk Field Office, and family members of the Edwards family, Knobling family, and Howe family, we are here to announce that a suspect has been identified in 2 separate homicides that happened more than 35 years ago in the Hampton Roads region. Through forensic evidence analyzed and certified by the Virginia Department of Forensic Science, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. has been declared the person responsible for the September 1987 double homicide in Isle of Wight County and a July 1989 homicide in the city of Hampton. Alan William Sr. died in December 2017 at the age of 63 at his residence in Lancaster County, Virginia, which is in the Northern Neck. As a result of the forensic findings, both the Isle of Wight County Commonwealth's Attorney and the City of Hampton Commonwealth's Attorney confirmed that if Alan William Sr. was alive today, he would be charged in all 3 of these homicides. Now, many in this region will recognize the Isle of Wight County double homicide as one that occurred during a series of double murders collectively known as the Colonial Parkway Murders. Although the similarities in these series of double homicides that spanned a 3-year period cannot be ignored, at this time, there is no forensic nor physical evidence to link the Isle of Wight County homicides to those other double murders. The remaining double homicides, the 2 in York County that occurred on the Colonial Parkway and the one that occurred in New Kent County, are still active investigations, and our combined investigative efforts continue.
Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., the suspect named by police, was unfortunately deceased at the time he was identified as a suspect. His DNA was obtained after his death, and since he wasn't a convicted felon, his DNA had never been previously tested against the known evidence. DNA has apparently linked Wilmer to the murders of Colonial Parkway victims David Knobling and Robin Edwards, although Virginia State Police haven't explained the exact details of that evidence quite yet. Nor did they mention how long Wilmer has been a suspect in the crime, although they did state that a tip eventually led them to suspect him. Alan Wilmer Sr., who died at the age of 63, passed away in September of 2017. Neighbors recalled him as a nice man that went hunting a lot and had an affection for dogs. Standing about 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing roughly 165 pounds, and having gone by the nickname Pokey, Wilmer owned a small fishing boat called the Denny Wade that he lived on for many years, operating a small clamming and oystering service off of it. He also ran a small business called Better Tree Service. He sailed often throughout southeast Virginia, and honestly, his rather nomadic lifestyle explains why he might not have been considered a suspect for many years. It would also explain away some of the details in the other crimes, such as the brine-soaked rope used to bind the first two known victims of the Colonial Parkway murders, Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. However, Wilmer has only been officially linked to the murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, so that's just speculation on my part. In addition to those two murders, though, Wilmer was also identified as the likely killer of Teresa Lynn Spa Howell, a 29-year-old that was strangled to death in the city of Hampton, Virginia in July of 1989. Her rape and murder has only ever been loosely linked to the Colonial Parkway murders through some comments online, based primarily on the proximity of the crime, but she has never been officially linked to any of the other crimes until just now. It is also worth mentioning that in my original coverage of the Colonial Parkway murders, I mention a possible connection to the unknown subject dubbed the Route 29 Stalker by some other publications. This was an unidentified offender who harassed and stalked women along Virginia's Route 29, ultimately culminating in the March 1996 murder of Alicia Showalter Reynolds. The offender in that case was described as a middle-aged man who drove a blue pickup truck. Wilmer, who would have been roughly 42 years old at the time, drove a blue 1966 Dodge Fargo pickup truck with the license plate EMRAW. Knowing that, a part of me feels like we're just beginning to scratch the surface of this guy's backstory. During his life, Wilmer also drove a white pickup truck, a van, and a silver 1989 Ford F-150. Now, we're going to pause for just a moment. If you would like to hear the rest of the press conference, please stay tuned after the break. Now, I'm going to play the rest of the press conference for you, taken from yesterday on January 8th, 2024. However, before I do, please know that investigators encourage anyone with information about Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. or these crimes to reach out to them and help them fill in some of the gaps. Wilmer has only been connected to 2 out of the 8 unsolved crimes commonly referred to as the Colonial Parkway murders. To date, there are no known forensic links between the rest, so investigators need your help in bringing the rest of these cases to resolution. Anyone with information can reach out to the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or by submitting a tip online at tip.fbi.gov. You can also reach out to the Virginia State Police through email at questions@vsp.virginia.gov. Now, without any further ado, here's the press conference.
Good afternoon. My name is Corinne Geller. I'm the Public Relations Director for the Virginia State Police. Thank you to all who are joining us today and to those watching via the live stream. The press conference will consist of several speakers, and then following that we will open the floor to questions, so we do ask our media friends to please hold off for your questions until the end. On behalf of the City of Hampton Police Division, the City of Hampton Commonwealth's Attorney Anton Bell, Isle of Wight County Commonwealth's Attorney Georgette Phillips, the Virginia State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigations Chesapeake Field Office, the FBI Norfolk Field Office, and family members of the Edwards family, Knobling family, and Howe family, we are here to announce that a suspect has been identified in 2 separate homicides that happened more than 35 years ago in the Hampton Roads region. Through forensic evidence analyzed and certified by the Virginia Department of Forensic Science, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. has been declared the person responsible for the September 1987 double homicide in Isle of Wight County and a July 1989 homicide in the city of Hampton. Alan William Sr. died in December 2017 at the age of 63 at his residence in Lancaster County, Virginia, which is in the Northern Neck. As a result of the forensic findings, both the Isle of Wight County Commonwealth's Attorney and the City of Hampton Commonwealth's Attorney confirmed that if Alan William Sr. was alive today, he would be charged in all 3 of these homicides. Now, many in this region will recognize the Isle of Wight County double homicide as one that occurred during a series of double murders collectively known as the Colonial Parkway Murders. Although the similarities in these series of double homicides that spanned a 3-year period cannot be ignored, at this time, there is no forensic nor physical evidence to link the Isle of Wight County homicides to those other double murders. The remaining double homicides, the 2 in York County that occurred on the Colonial Parkway and the one that occurred in New Kent County, are still active investigations, and our combined investigative efforts continue. In fact, we are still seeking the public's help through our continued efforts to seek justice for the victims of these and other unsolved crimes. Today's announcement also does not conclude our agency's investigative efforts to determine if Alan Williams Sr. was responsible for additional crimes, which we will explore later in this press conference. Because the Isle of Wight County and the City of Hampton cases are both more than 30 years old, for everyone's benefit, we're going to revisit the facts of these 2 homicides investigations. First, and going in chronological order, we'll address the Virginia State Police case. The evening of September 19th, 1987, was the last time 20-year-old David Lee Knobling and 14-year-old Robin Margaret Edwards were seen together alive. The next day, on September 20th, David's Ford Ranger pickup truck was discovered in the parking lot of the Ragged Island Wildlife Management and Refuge Area. On September 23rd, 1987, tragically, their bodies were found along the shoreline of Ragged Island, which is located near the south shore of the James River in Isle of Wight County. This investigation has been primarily investigated by the Virginia State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigations Chesapeake Field Office, with the cooperation of the FBI and, more recently, the City of Hampton Police Division. I would now like to call forward Hampton Police Captain Rebecca Warren, Deputy Commander of Investigation, to share details about their case.
Thank you. 29-year-old Teresa Spall Howell was last seen alive on July 1st, 1989, at approximately 2:30 a.m. in the city of Hampton, outside of the Zodiac Club. The Zodiac Club is no longer in existence today, but at the time was a popular night spot. It was located at 209 East Mercury Boulevard. At approximately 10:10 a.m. that same day, construction crews arrived at 521 Butler Farm Road to complete work when they located female clothing near the site. A short time later, the remains of an unidentified female were discovered in the woodline not far from the clothing. On July 4th, 1989, a missing person report was filed in York County, leading to the identification of the victim as Teresa Spall Howell. Teresa had been sexually assaulted and died as a result of strangulation. For the last 34 years, this case had been actively investigated by the Hampton Police Division with the assistance from Virginia State Police and the FBI. The following statement is issued on behalf of Teresa Spall Howell's family, known by her family as Terry. We would like to express our gratitude to all investigators involved in the investigation of Terry's death. Their dedication, relentless efforts, and evolving technology have brought us closure that we have sought over the last 34 years. While we are grateful for the closure that has been provided, nothing will bring Terry back. The void left by her absence over the years is inexpressible. We kindly request privacy as we navigate through a host of new emotions that this brings. We appreciate the support received from family, friends over the course of this time, and ask that you continue to keep our family in your thoughts and prayers. Once again, thank you to the Hampton Police Division, Virginia State Police, and the FBI for your commitment to justice.
The resolution of these 2 homicide cases was the direct result of interagency cooperation. It was through persistent investigative measures taken by our agencies that enabled the Virginia Department of Forensic Science in June of 2023 to positively link Alan Williams Sr. to David, Robin, and Teresa's deaths. It took the proactive interagency cooperation of sharing Alan Williams Sr.'s genetic profile that helped us achieve these long-awaited results. Alan Williams Sr. had no felonies on his criminal record, so his DNA had never been obtained until it was necessary for identification purposes following his death. The Virginia Department of Forensic Science issued a certificate of analysis confirming a genetic match to Alan Williams Sr. based on evidence collected from the Isle of Wight County and City of Hampton homicide victims. We recognize this announcement has been a long time coming, especially for the families of these victims. While we do hope this provides a sense of closure to them, we recognize there are still other families related to the Colonial Parkway homicide victims who are still hoping for answers. That's why we continue to push forward with our investigations. We're not ruling anything out when examining other cases and pursuing new ones. Our agencies are still working to reconstruct the movements and encounters of Alan Williams Sr., so that's why we're asking for the public's help. Alan Williams Sr., who went by the nickname Pokey, he was 5'5", muscular, and weighed approximately 165 pounds. He had sandy brown hair, blue eyes, and often sported a close-cropped beard. Alan Williams Sr. drove a distinctive blue 1966 Dodge Fargo pickup truck with the Virginia license plate EM Raw. And he typically had clamming equipment in the bed as well as a large metal toolbox. Now, this was just one of several pickup trucks and other vehicles that Wilmer was known to drive in the 1980s and early 1990s. Alan Williams Sr. also had a small commercial fishing boat. It was named the Denny Wade. It was a 1976 custom-built wooden boat. He often lived on it during this time and would dock at marinas in the counties of Gloucester and Middlesex, as well as around the Northern Neck and the Hampton Roads region. His trade during the 1980s was as a fisherman, mainly farming clams and oysters. He also ran his own business. It was a tree service called Better Tree Service. He was an avid hunter and belonged to at least one local hunt club in the Middle Peninsula region. I would now like to ask Special Agent in Charge Brian Dugan with the FBI Norfolk office to step forward.
Thank you, Corinne. On behalf of the FBI, I want to express my sincere condolences to the victims' families. While these tragedies occurred decades ago, I recognize how much pain followed them throughout those years without any answers. And there still may be more families out there hoping to close their chapters as well. That's why we're asking the public to take a good look at the suspect's photos. If you had any encounters with him or his vehicle or watercraft, hunted with him, farmed oysters or clams, docked next to him in marinas, spent time with him on a personal basis or at work, or even romantically to some point, we want to hear from you. We're also interested in hearing from the public about areas where Wilmer had worked in, both as a fisherman and tree cutter, locations where he may have been known to hunt, or bars, clubs, or lounges he frequented. A piece of information, no matter how small, could be useful to investigators. To submit a report, we're encouraging the public to call the FBI's tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI, or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. Alternatively, you can also contact the state police via email at questions@vsp.virginia.gov. We recognize relationships and loyalties change over time, as do people and their perspectives. There are occasions where people who may have had knowledge of the incident did not feel comfortable coming forward with the information at the time. This may have been due to close relationships with persons involved, or out of concern of their own safety, reputation, or standing amongst friends. Even though Mr. Wilmer is deceased, we want you to know it is not too late to come forward. Again, the FBI tip line is listed here. Again, 800-CALL-FBI, or online, tips.fbi.gov, or again, emailing Virginia State Police, questions@vsp.virginia.gov. You can also reach out to Hampton Police via the Peninsula Crime Line, where you can provide information anonymously. I also want to add that the FBI continues to have multiple open investigations that we're looking into to see if Mr. Wilmer is connected to, including victims Kathy Thomas, Rebecca Dowski, Richard Call, and Cassandra Haley. While he may or may not be connected to these cases, we are still pursuing justice for these victims and will investigate all options. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to call to the podium Lieutenant Colonel Tim Lyon. He is the Bureau Director for our Bureau of Criminal Investigation.
Thank you, Corinne. I don't think I can impress enough of the significance of this announcement for the families today with us and for the investigators that's been part of this operation for their tireless determination to bring a resolution to these crimes. I echo Captain Warren's remarks about the importance and necessity of multi-agency collaboration. I too want to thank the FBI Norfolk Field Office, the City of Hampton Police Department, the City of Hampton and the Isle of Wight County Commonwealth Attorneys, Virginia Department of Forensic Science, and the state police special agents and supervisors for the work they have put forth on these cases for more than 3 decades to bring us to this day. Most importantly, I want to thank the Edwards, Knobling, and Howe families for your patience and understanding over the years. Only those who have suffered the loss of a child in this way can truly understand the depth of your sorrow and the frustration over not knowing who was responsible for taking your loved one's life in such a violent and cruel way. I do hope the identification of their killer brings some sense of closure and peace for you. Moving forward, we continue our work to ensure other families have their day too, and a chance at closure and justice. Fueling those ongoing investigative efforts is a small, highly dedicated team of civilian analysts known as our Unresolved Violent Crime Analytical Support Team. These state police employees are funded through a U.S. Bureau of Justice National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It's known as SAKI. It's a grant that is allocated through the Office of the Virginia Attorney General, Jason Miyares. A key component of the SAKI program is to provide the additional resources needed to address cold case sexual assault investigations and prosecutions that result from evidence and combined DNA index system hits that are produced by tested sexual assault kits. Our analysts have been an invaluable resource to the resolution of these 3 homicides, as well as the ongoing investigative efforts of multiple other unsolved sexual assaults, missing persons, and homicides across the Commonwealth. Again, it all comes back to sharing investigative resources, tools, expertise, information, analysis, and people within those agencies. That's how we as law enforcement and prosecutors can make things happen. That's how we as law enforcement and prosecutors can make a difference today and hopefully in the months and years to come for crime victims and their families. So thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Lyon. And now I would like to read a statement on behalf of the Knobling and Edwards families. For 36 years, our families have lived in a vacuum of the unknown. We have lived with the fear of worrying that a person capable of deliberately killing Robin and David could attack and claim another victim. Now we have a sense of relief and justice knowing that he can no longer victimize another. His death will not allow us to seek out the answers to countless questions that have haunted us for so long. We also recognize this is a difficult time for the Wilmer family and ask that the public extend the same grace to them as we do. We thank the Virginia State Police and the FBI for never giving up on this case. We're grateful for their collective efforts and sharing of information, evidence, and their determination to find our killer. We extend our prayers to Teresa Howe's family. We are now connected through this tragedy and will forever be linked. They are survivors like us, and we will draw from one another's strength and perseverance moving forward. They've also asked all 3 families for the media to please respect their privacy. and try not to contact them in the wake of this news today. There's also in your media packets a statement from the Wilmer family that they asked to provide to the media as well. At this time, we will open the floor for questions.
Did any of the family members want to come to the microphone and say anything?
No, they asked us to convey their thoughts through their statements.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy.
Teresa Lynn Hall, was there ever an arrest in that case? And if there was an arrest in that case, what happened to that? Was there ever an arrest in that case?
I don't know, that would be for Hampton to address. We'll follow back up with you on that one, Andy.
What was it about what was the DNA evidence that linked him with what happened at Ragged Island? What was it specifically?
It was the evidence collected from the victims both at Ragged Island in Isle of Wight County and the city of Hampton. The evidence collected there that was then compared by the Virginia Department of Forensic Science to his genetic DNA. And that's how they were able to make that collective validation.
Did his profession as a waterman, he was a hunter, I guess the tree service, did that play into any of the other incidents involving the Colonial Parkway murder or with the one with Knobling and Edwards? What was his connection to the scene of the crime?
Well, you've got to consider we're talking 30 plus years that these cases occurred. And over that time, through the investigative efforts, each one of these homicide cases have been handled on their own merits, their own individual merits. And obviously during 30 plus years, through evidence, witness statements, tips from the public, all of that is called multiple suspects during time. And because of the collective efforts of our agencies, they were able to develop various suspects. The genetic material of Wilmer, once it was learned that he was deceased, we were able to legally obtain his genetic material and then be able to submit that to the Virginia Department of Forensic Science, which then was able to compare it to the evidence that had been collected in our cases in Ragged Island. And that's how we were able to get to where we are today.
Why were you not able to legally obtain the DNA from him while he was alive? Why did you have to wait until he was dead?
It was simply during the course of going back and revisiting these cases that he was developed as a particular suspect and someone to evaluate at this time.
Can you tell us about the tip that came in that connected the dots to him?
No.
You can't say what specifically led you guys to develop him as a suspect?
It was just during the course of 30 years worth of investigations. And part of the cold case philosophy is to go back over and start re-looking and going back through all the witness statements, all the evidence. And it's a very time-consuming, very complex, but very effective way. And that's where we were able to dedicate these resources, revisit these cases, go back through and re-look at them. And then that's when it was discovered that Wilmer had passed away, and decided let's follow through on that and see if there's genetic material that we can. And he wasn't the only suspect that was submitted to the Department of Forensic Science. The Department of Forensic Science had actually identified a common suspect between the Hampton and the Isle of Wight County cases a couple years ago, but because he was never in the system, he was never in the CODIS database, there was no hit. So we had a common suspect, he just had not been identified. So it was not until we were able to get that genetic material, then work it through the Department of Forensic Science, that was able to connect the dots and connect these two cases.
Can you say how early on in the investigation he was developed as a potential suspect? I mean, or was it fairly shortly after the murders happened that he was developed as a potential suspect? Or was this something that he was developed as a potential suspect, decades later?
I'm not going to get into the specifics at this time, just because we still have, as we said, this is kind of, I hate to use the cliche, but the beginning of the end. And again, we're not saying these cases are closed, they're resolved right now, because we know there's a lot more work to do. And that's one reason why we haven't come forward. We've had the confirmation last summer, but there's been a lot of work going on since then. And that's just doing our due diligence and revisiting. So we don't want to get into too many specifics, because we are still moving forward. And that's why we're asking the public to help us build that timeline, help us, let us know if you knew him, how you knew him, what encounters you had, so we can build that timeline and find out if in fact there are other victims out there.
Just to be clear, you guys believe these are or are not connected to the Colonial Park homicide?
At this time, there is no physical nor forensic evidence to connect the Isle of Wight or the City of Hampton homicides to the two in York County on the Colonial Parkway or the one in New Kent County. And it's forensics and advancements in technology. It really is amazing what the Department of Forensic Science has been able to accomplish. And because of resubmitting material over and over again and being persistent by the investigators dedicated to this case, that has gotten us here. And we recognize it's going to be the forensics that either connects those dots later on down the road or disconnects those dots. So there's still a lot of work to be done at this point.
Corinne, is it safe to say the technology you used to resolve these cases weren't available, say, like 30 years ago, 20 years ago?
Correct, correct. And it speaks a lot to those investigators 30 plus years ago who recognized that evidence collected at a scene, the technology wasn't there, but that they preserved it enough to enable us 36 years later to be here today.
The case, this case has been resolved.
Yes, correct. Isla White, yes. And
Now, this happened in September of '87. At what point was he ever a suspect in that case? Now that he is deceased, are you able to tell us when he was he ever identified?
no, we're not going to get into those specifics at this time. So we've got time for one more question. I know this has been a difficult and trying time for the family, so we want to be respectful of their time.
If an arrest was made in this other case, which you're going to get me the information on,
Mhm.
right? Then it would suggest that the wrong person was arrested.
I can't speak on behalf of that. That's just speculation at this point. Once we get the details with you, we'll discuss it.
Because he's the one responsible, not the
Correct,
person who was arrested.
correct.
Because he wasn't an assistant.
Correct, yeah. Okay. All right. The press release has also been sent to all your newsrooms. That went out. And if you guys want the photographs and the maps and everything there, you can just email me and I'll send them to you. Okay? All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.